The Board of Selectmen, today, May 20th, 2019. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is approval of minutes from our May 6th meeting.
Thank you.
I said to my wife, how could you chat about it? Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from May 6th, 2019.
And I have
Is there a second?
Second.
found it.
Seconded by Liza. Any discussion? John, you had said you had a correction?
Yes, I have a correction under C, water hookup on Old Farms Road.
Okay.
Add the following paragraph. Selectman Blessington pointed out that the resident had submitted to the Board of Selectmen a detailed plan of how to accomplish the hookup as he had promised. Selectman Blessington didn't have the document with him, but was confident he had it at home. He remembered it was dated in January, right after the last meeting of the resident had attended. The other selectmen will look into it.
All right. Accept that amendment.
That's
That's a correction. Yep.
correction.
Mhm. It was not in an email. It was, I believe it was hand delivered. That was some of our discussion. Any other discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, is there anyone present to speak? An item that's not on the agenda? Yes, just identify yourself for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Rick Maloney. I just wanted to speak in favor of the purchase of St. Jude's and encourage the Board of Selectmen to do what they can to accommodate the Hill, is to make this happen. I think it's very important for the town. In addition to that, I'd like to encourage you to create a proposal for an ordinance for the water hookup, so that we know, how to hook it up, how to bill people, because I'm assuming when the Hill gets this property, hoping that they do, they're going to probably need water. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else present to speak? All right, correspondent.
I'll say
yeah,
something.
sorry.
Sure. Steph Summers, White Road. I just want to encourage you to give good, strong consideration to the firehouse proposal, because I think it's a smart idea. I think the access on 74 is a great safety feature for the whole town, definitely for the school's proximity. And I think that it's just a really good plan for the future to expand what the town needs, keep the firehouses in the various areas for the homeowners to have good access. So I'm just hoping you'll think about it. I think it's a good deal.
Thank you.
But I have a point of order. Present to speak is for items which are not on the agenda, and this purchase is on the agenda, so we will get to that.
Oh, I'm
point.
sorry, I thought.
That's okay.
Anyone else present to speak? Okay. You should have a list of correspondence.
John, your correspondence is upstairs.
Well,
Mine too. That leaves two of us.
all two letters, three.
3 letters and one else to be detailed. Thank you. Okay.
Census survey, that's
Yes.
next year's, I think.
2020. Okay. Status reports. So there's one remaining project on CI, from the CIP from 17-18.
left incomplete, I apologize. And that's the fire department parking lot paving. Are you still holding off on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to get answers, but we'd like to move forward a little bit more with this, our new endeavor. And then, like I said, we're gonna determine how long it's gonna be, things like that, and
Okay.
see what the best use of the money is for the town.
So that was LoSiP money that was set aside at that point. Other items we'll speak to. So I will then move into Public Works update. Troy, see you hiding out there in the back?
The steps here are done at the office building finally. They're all. Sweeping's going along. We're still grading the dirt roads. We've done a couple more waterways on Potter Schoolhouse. I borrowed a bucket truck from Putnam, so we installed a new rope and a new flag at the transfer station. I know there was a couple concerns with that, so we got that taken care of. I talked with Alex about the radios. We're still waiting for prices on that. And I just want to present, we're getting a new over-the-rail mower, roadside mower. So I put a little packet of 3 prices I got for you guys. I'll give them to you. You can see what you would like to do. I have that now.
Okay.
And if there's any questions, I can explain a little bit what the...
So that's now that the budget has passed. Forward to funds that were approved. Purchase of a new roadside mower.
The top one from Big Boys came in cheaper than the other 2. Big Boys has a little bit bigger of a tractor and a bigger boom, but they actually have a rotary head and a flail head. So the rotary head is for if there's heavier brush and stuff like that, where the flail is more for grass.
And the budgeted amount was?
I think it was 156, I think. So there's actually quite a bit of
So for the
savings.
3 proposals you have, if I recall,
Under you.
one well under. So it's 101 then plus
The 2, yeah, so it's like 124 something, yeah.
131 and 37. Take a look at these. Are you anticipating others?
No, that's pretty much about it, yeah.
So until this is purchased, which would be after July 1, we're at a standstill with roadside mowing, is that?
Yeah, there is the little M&B mower, but it's really not that sufficient. It doesn't have a long reach to it. So it's just basically 1 or 2 passes down the road, that's it. We can't really hit some of the areas that, sightline issues that we're having to cut stuff back. That's why I said we should get a little bit longer boom than what there is now.
We'll take a look at these and then move forward with the process for purchase. Any questions? So the front steps, the core was done, it passed inspection. We're just waiting for
The state
modifications on the
for rail.
handrails, correct? So there are a couple of code items that they're applying for modification on. And one is there's a rail outside at the end of the ramp where it meets the door outside the selectman's office. So because that was existing, it wouldn't meet code as far as distance from. So both our building inspector and the state official were in favor of the modifications, but we have to go through the process. So that those could take a couple of weeks, but they indicated to you,
Yes,
correct?
yep.
So we look forward to hearing from them.
And then one more thing with catch basin cleaning. The gentleman that has been doing it for a few years decided not to do it this year. So what was budgeted was around $18,000. I've contacted a few different companies and they don't do it by the hour, they do it by the day. And they're averaging anywhere from $1,700 to $2,500 a day. And they figure they can do about 30 a day. There's roughly between 750 and 800 basins. So there's a big difference. So I'm still trying to work out a couple different things before, but there's not a lot of companies out there that do that.
How long, the company that we had been using, do you know how long?
It took them about a month and a half.
But do you know how long they had been doing our catch basins?
Probably for maybe, I want to say the last 4 or 5 years.
So it makes sense that the amount that was budgeted was based on anticipating the same vendor.
we can get something a little by meaning a clamshell, like what's proposed is a vac truck, which basically sucks everything out just like a vacuum. Where they can come in with a clamshell, but it just goes down, picks up, it doesn't get the edges, it really doesn't do a good job. It's a temporary fix.
It's like a one and
It's
done, what it gets.
Yeah, what it gets, that's it. Can't go sideways, it's just up and down, and that's it. So, and that's a little bit cheaper, but you're not getting a good job out of it, basically.
Once again, we had budgeted,
About, I think it was around 18,000. Yeah,
Big difference. Are you?
yeah, I'm still
Thinking
trying
out.
to get a couple, prices out there. I've been on the state website, I'm pulling all the connections I have, and a couple of people haven't emailed me back yet the prices, but the ones I have are extremely higher than what we've budgeted.
And if I recall, did you say to me one person wouldn't even give you a
What?
quote because they said you can't afford us?
Yeah, yeah. He's like, yeah, he goes, I don't want to do business, you can't afford us, and I was like, okay.
Which kind of speaks to that number, John, a little bit more than what we budgeted. Okay, so you'll keep us up
I'll
to
keep
date?
you, yeah.
Because that would be a significant budget difference.
And then I'm planning on burning the brush on June 3rd at the transfer station, as long as DEP says that it's a go. The lady came today, checked out the pile, said it was able to burn, but now we just need to wait for them to say okay. So once the permit comes back, and I've been in contact with the fire department, they said they would give us a truck there during the day.
Thank you.
That's pretty much it.
Any questions? Okay. So the first item of old business, thank you, Troy. You can stay or you can. The next item is to discuss a purchase request, and the Board of Finance requested the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting. So at the Board of Finance meeting on Thursday, there was discussion, and then a motion was made to recommend the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting to allocate $60,000 to WIllington Hill Fire Department. So we know that it was about a purchase, but technically the motion didn't speak to what we were allocating for, and there was no discussion of funds. So that's something.
In terms of where it was coming
In terms of what they didn't do was discuss where, this is an unbudgeted purchase, so there was no discussion about where the money would come from. So that's something in order to move forward to town meeting. The governing body that calls a town meeting is the Board of Selectmen, and that typically comes after a recommendation by the Board of Finance to allocate funds, and they would say how much they were, what exactly it was for, and where it would be coming from the budget. So those are questions we don't have answered. So I don't believe we, at this meeting, would be able to call a town meeting because we don't have those questions answered. So there had been some discussion, I know I had given you an update at our last meeting based on the meeting that we had with the land use department to answer some of the questions on how the property could be used and how it then could begin to be used. So Mike has given us a memo today following up on that meeting. And he's here if we had questions as to any of the items on his memo. It's in this area for you, John, if you want to take a look at it. Speaking as to if the firehouse isn't allowed use for the church property, and the answer was yes. There's a special permit, and I'm reading from Mike's memo now. So a special permit would be applied for and approved by planning and zoning. It would need to be done before the fire department could conduct activities. This process would take 60 days and would require a public hearing to be held. The answers to some of these questions are after the purchase, so it doesn't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily us hindering moving the discussion forward, but these were some of the questions that had come up and raised, so I wanted to make sure you were aware of all the answers. The Planning and Zoning Commission would look at things during the application phase, including parking, site access, noise, lighting, and other use-specific qualities related to the use of the property as a firehouse. The application process would also require a site plan to be developed by an engineer that outlines all of the details as required in the zoning regulations. And and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that was something that Jim had spoke to that might involve some excess costs that the fire department may not have budgeted for.
Right, so I kind of at the bottom, I tried to get into that a little bit. Jim's away, so he couldn't co-draft the memo with me, but, and I have, I mean, there's extras here, you guys can look at them. These aren't anything new that we didn't discuss, but I'm talking to the use of the site. Jim is talking specifically to the occupancy of the building, and any potential change of use under the building code would require potential review by an architect to make sure that there weren't any code updates. But that isn't part of the planning and zoning realm. So I put in here, I put that note on number 7, and basically they would essentially hire an architect to evaluate the building and submit a report to the building official for review. Who would make the determination on if code requirements were necessary.
There had been discussion as to how the rectory, the current rectory could be rented, and Mike's response to that, and this was shared in the meeting, was that the single-family home was originally permitted as a rectory building on the same parcel as the church, because you cannot have two primary uses, a firehouse and a home, on one parcel. You could not rent it as a single-family dwelling at this time. There was some talk at the Board of Finance meeting. There was a resident who had suggested that maybe we could look at, if the town was part of that purchase, we could look at using that facility to help some families who are having to have their foundations replaced, and that be someplace we could offer them temporary housing. But it does appear, based on the zoning codes, that we would not be allowed to do that, correct? Because that would not be, using it in that way would not be an accessory to the firehouse, or the fire department, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Doesn't mean they couldn't use it as an accessory to the firehouse, where they use it for offices or other things. But I think originally, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, you were hoping that maybe you could rent it to generate some revenue to build back up the monies that you put into the land.
Yeah, and so it's not completely out of the question at this point, depending on who we can get to work with us on subdivision stuff if that's necessary. There was talk of a waiver with hardship and stuff, so the two different things that are on the table we're looking into. Again, our primary goal for renting the property would be to put some revenue back towards the town, or to offset some
Right.
costs, so it's not a burden on the town.
But as long as it was on parcel.
Yeah, as long as it's one
It sounds
parcel,
like that would-
like I said, unless there was some kind of waiver or hardship or something, but then we'd have to subdivide, and then dissolve that subdivision afterwards. So we're looking into what that would cost, or who we can get.
So if the rectory is being rented and the other building is not being used for anything for a period of, let's say, 3 or 4 years, is that permissible for the rectory to be
That question was
rented
gonna
while the
come up.
other building is
That's a little more complicated, because the building permit for the rectory says rectory.
Mhm.
It wasn't built, even though it looks like a single-family home, the permit that was issued was for a rectory. So to have a single-family home that has an accessory church, it gets a little cumbersome there, and a lot of towns, and I know that the town would not control this parcel, but a lot of towns that have projects related to this own land and also exempt themselves from the regulations, acknowledging that towns don't always have the same needs and processes as a private party or as a corporation. Sometimes things like this come up. Wellington is not one of those towns. So Wellington would need to follow all the standards as anybody else. So I think that would be tricky. That's not to say that it would be impossible, but without control of the land, we would need to make sure that long-term, once you have someone in the house and now, there could be a potential issue and they want to now move forward with the firehouse project, you don't want something to get slowed down because of logistics. So we'd have to look at that.
Refresh my memory on the septic system. There's one system on the land now for both the church and...
Yeah, Tom can speak better to that, but I believe they both function independently.
They do, they both function independently, they're both separate wells and septic systems.
One of those folklore items, John.
Well,
Everyone always thought.
let's find out.
Yeah, and the septic system and basement was recently inspected, and the septic system, the house has passed, They had trouble finding the septic system for the church. It wasn't on maps, things like that. We had to do a lot of digging and stuff. So that's scheduled to be inspected as well. But it hasn't been inspected yet. So everything so far has passed all inspections, and they are separate.
Okay.
And speaking to the rental of the property, the house, the rectory, I should say, again, that's something we'd like to do to lessen the burden on the taxpayers. With the allocation or the proposed allocation that the Board of Finance has put in front of you, the $60,000, we would be able to maintain as is without having to do that. But again, we'd like to do that because it would lessen the burden. So that's where we stand right now. I mean, it's a goal, and we are working with people that are experts in the area of subdivision, things like that, to see exactly what it would cost and how long it would take, things like that. So we're working on all angles of the permits, the special use permits for the hall or the church itself, and that subdivision.
You mentioned, and Mike, can you address that they could use the rectory to rent if they wanted, if they had a hardship? What would that hardship have to be for them to qualify?
To rent, well, that would be, if they got the use permit for the firehouse, I think the rental of the hall would be part and parcel of that, because it's more or less what they're doing now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think that would be an issue. The hardship would be more if they were going to be requesting a variance from the ZBA for a section of the zoning regulations that they couldn't comply with for one reason or another. The state law in Connecticut requires that they demonstrate hardship, which is unique to the property, not characteristic elsewhere in the district, which in this case is any residential property in Willington. And it cannot be self-created, financial in nature, essentially. So those are the standards that the state sets forth that they would have to prove to the ZBA, and the ZBA has the power to essentially waive any regulation in Willington if they make those findings.
And again, the goal would be to lessen the burden on the town taxpayers, things like that, to get that subdivision or variance or hardship, through the ZBA. But, again, it's not something at this point it's necessary. But
Can I ask you how, so what you asked for at the Board of Finance was $60,000. 50 to go towards the purchase of the property, and 10 is what you believe would be to maintain the property. If you were, let's say that you were able to get all those things and you were able to rent the property, and you say to lessen the burden from the taxpayers, would you anticipate that rental going back to the town or back to the fire
Yeah, we'd be
department?
open to that.
I'm curious.
yeah, no, we'd be absolutely open to giving it back to the town. I mean, just open to discussion with the town.
I mean, that's probably a few steps forward, so I didn't
Yeah,
think you had a
yeah.
plan for that yet already.
Yep.
And that looks like it could take several.
Yeah, and the extra, the
Steps.
50,000 was towards the purchase. The extra 10 was based on the bills that the church provided us, as to what they've been paying recently, the last couple of years, to maintain and keep the property as it is.
One of the other questions was the fire department exempt from zoning, and they are not, the project doesn't meet all zoning requirements. Could the fire department create access on Talon Turnpike? There's a piece of the property that you don't see that goes all the way out to 74, and so I don't believe that would not be possible, but Connecticut DOT would oversee that because it would be access to the state road.
How much frontage does it have on 74?
And it's about 40 feet, yeah, 40 feet.
40 feet?
Yep, enough for a driveway.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's enough to meet anybody's regulations, isn't it? Usually require a much larger frontage than that.
I don't know what a driveway requires in frontage is
Well, in Willington, I believe it's 200 feet.
for a driveway.
Frontage, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
that-
for
it's
a new lot,
It's not that big.
Yeah, this is existing, so they wouldn't have a problem with that. I think they probably have the width to be able to accommodate an out. They might not have enough for DOT standards because of the speed of Talon Turnpike to get an in, but they're not rushing when they're coming in. So they could come down Old Farms if they needed to, but the primary time saver would be to be able to come out. That would be my guess. So standard aisle, 24 feet, something like that. They have 40, so that.
But I think that's multiple steps down the road,
Right.
right? So until there was a new, until you're fire apparatus were located there, that would make a change, right? Is that what you're anticipating? Then you would need a change.
Yeah,
Well,
all
but
the
if
construction.
we are talking about someday putting a firehouse there, that's a question that should be addressed now as well. We can't say, oh, we'll worry about it when the time comes.
Well, I mean, we could certainly put a firehouse there. The accessible right-of-way to Route 74 is a bonus. And, you know, the firehouse can, you know, definitely work right there, with or without that, but.
You are right
Yeah.
now.
Because
Right,
once
right,
upon,
Yeah, but
Just
that's right
the
now.
Old Farms Road.
Yes, just
once
on the
upon a
opposite side of
time,
the street.
they put the, if I remember correctly, they put the traffic light on Old Farms specifically because the firehouse, that's the only reason it was put it there, was because the firehouse was there, which made sense. And even now, it might still make sense if you move the firehouse to still use that, because that light's gonna be a lot easier than try to pull trucks out on 74 on a 40-foot frontage or whatever. Anyway, I just wondered, and
Can I sort of refocus the conversation for a second on what the initial question was? Because we were asked to put some sort of vote or create some sort of town meeting for $60,000. And I feel like we're getting a little bit astray and down a farther path from what we've been asked to do. So from your opinion, Erica, what you're saying is that we don't know where this money's coming from and what it's specifically designated to do at this point in order to have enough
Correct.
information to call a town meeting?
Correct, if we're calling a town meeting, we would be saying exactly what it's allocated for, which would be decided here, and then where the funds would be coming from. So that's important to know. So there is no additional $60,000 in our budget. So the budget just passed, it begins July 1. There was no buffer.
So for the Board of Selectmen budget, correct?
Correct,
So the town budget,
no.
was there any conversation about where from the town budget?
There was no
the Board of
conversation
Finance
at the
gave
Board
any
of Finance.
direction?
Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, as a member of the Board of Finance. What they didn't have was discussion about where the funds will come from. And that's an important discussion to have. Typically, in the process, we would go to them, let's say, like a oil tank replacement at Hall School, for instance. By the time we asked for allocation of funds, it was a project that existed, the money had been budgeted for, and we knew where it was coming from. That's not to say that it had to have already been a project budgeted for. Sometimes these things happen and it can happen, but there needs to be discussion about where the money is going to come from. And that hasn't taken place.
And is
There
that-
is no extra money. I'd love to say we had $60,000 just extra in the budget, but we do not.
Well, I know you're over in the general fund, so I'm not sure if that's where they're talking about taking it.
I don't know, because they
Yeah.
had zero conversation about it,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah, I'm not
didn't
sure
even
if
come
there's
up as
just
a topic,
rumblings about that.
which
So is that
struck
a
me
Board
as
of
odd.
Finance decision to make? Or is that something that we have the ability to make with the right information?
I think the Board of Finance would have to make it. We've been asked to call a town meeting on recommendation of the Board of Finance, so they have to recommend to us what we can ask them. We can't just say,
Right.
yeah. you have to-
That's what I'm trying to hone in on, so we
Yeah.
can actually make.
So I think we can have the
a motion on
discussion about maybe what we think, where we think the funds could come from,
Mhm.
if that's what we wanted to do. But they would, essentially, they are the body that says, yes, we recommend you call a town meeting for this much money from this fund for this project. And so there's some steps there that just haven't happened. There needs to be some discussion. I think it's important to talk about where the funds would come from. At this point, to me, the general fund is the only place I would see it. There is not a budgeted line item that is plus $60,000.
So then my request would be for my being able to make a decision on anything, or putting anything forward to a town meeting, would be where that money is expected to be coming from and what is the agreement. So that if we are asking the people of Willington to vote on whether or not to allocate this $60,000, they know what they're voting for. Whether that be a portion share of this property and decision-making rights, or whether that's just in supplement and support of the fire department with no ability to make decisions on how that land is used and the buildings are used. I think that's going to be really important, that if we're going to be asking to take $60,000 from any fund, that there be some outlined decision-making process that either includes or excludes the town, so that when the town is voting, they know what they're voting for. If we're allocating money and we have a voice in the way that this property will be used, then it's a question to the fire department of us giving $60,000, does that then obligate us to be only doing the fire department on that piece of property? Or do we have some ability to help craft what sort of building and what use that piece of property ultimately has? And I think those are really important pieces of information that we need to answer so that when we're asking people to vote on whether or not we're gonna spend this money, they know what they're voting for.
And we know from the conversations, Tom, that 50,000 of that you want to use specifically towards the purchase. So that leaves the 10,000. For my information's sake, I think it's important that we know what the $10,000 would represent. If it were a typical budget time, you would bring forth a budget that would spell out everything you needed, and this would be included in that. So I think it would be important for us to see, and it might be a good exercise for you to make sure that that is enough money to maintain it, and not necessarily a rough estimate, because what you don't want to do is us to go through this process and find out that it's not enough money to actually maintain the property. Because you're talking about maintaining the open fields that are there, right? So there's grass, and there is no funds right currently in the contract we have with the landscaping that we do.
Right.
So because we don't currently mow what little grass both of your fire departments have, it's not much, but it's a little. So this is a lot more than what you currently have. So there's nothing from the town vendor side to cover that. You're talking about insurance, you're talking about electricity. I'd assume you'd want some cable and/or internet services in the hall, at least in the church portion of the facility, and you'd want to know what those would cost you. I don't know if the church used those in there, maybe in the rectory. So all of the items that would fall under that $10,000, I'd want to know what that was. And you may find that it's less or that it's a lot more.
No, I could certainly provide a list of exactly what it would go towards. The way we calculated it was, again, the diocese forwarded us the last couple of months of electricity and heat, and we added in there the insurance and a little bit for, like you said, cable and stuff like that. So again, it's right there on the money for the numbers. I don't think it's inflated, or I don't think it'll be too short. Based on that, I mean, if we do anything additional, we would come back to the in terms of remodeling or what have you. But again, we could do a lot of the stuff that needs to be done inside ourselves. And again, with the lawn mowing, same thing. We could do that kind of thing ourselves, volunteering. So that's what it's based on.
When you say come back to us for remodeling, do you anticipate then coming back to the town to cover expenses for remodeling either of the pieces of?
Well, I think what our intention is, like I said before, is that the property becomes part of the WIllington Hill Fire Department. So we're going to be using it over there for rentals and things like that, utilizing space at the current facility for things like we talked about, for decontamination zones or keeping dirty gear, things like that. We don't have a lot of space for right now. So again, we just kind of shift things around, and the money that we're requesting would get us to next budget and give us a better picture of exactly what needs to be done. We're not talking about remodeling, we're just talking about getting in there, moving some furniture and using it, putting some paint on it or something. But
Okay, because what I heard from the building official was that you need to hire an architect to evaluate the building, and that's a cost that is right now you haven't budgeted for, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to use it today, so you can purchase it, but then how long before you'll be able to utilize the facility?
Yeah, and I don't have all the exact answers on the architect thing. I think that's if we change uses and a lot of other things that I'm not familiar with. Again, we have people that we're talking to that are experts in that and reviewing exactly what we have to do.
But we are changing the use if it goes from a church to the fire department.
Yeah, I mean, there's again, different use codes and stuff to be changed to, and I don't know if we have to make those leaps.
You will have to get an architect, trust me on that.
Again,
It's
we're
gonna be
working
very
I
expensive.
thought you heard
Working on
that
that.
very clear from Jim, and that it was important that you understood that that was gonna come at an expense.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we're checking to see exactly what an architect would cost us and stuff, and we have money budgeted, and we're asking actually for them to volunteer their time to go in and square things away.
What we haven't talked about is, so the town is, I believe the discussion, at least from your side, was asking for the money to be made additional to the grant that we, to the fund that we currently give you and that you utilize for fire services. So, with that, they'd be using it to make the purchase. At what point, what does the ownership look like between the fire
Like I
department and
stated,
the
in
town?
terms of ownership and liability, you have a contract with us to provide service, fire service, and the example I used last time is if we had an engine blow on a truck, it could cost close to that anyway, 35, 40,000. And it's the same thing, we need something to better the service of the town, to repair the service of the town, and right now, that's exactly what we'd be doing. And we need some repairs in the building, we need some upgrades, and we need some things fixed, so to do that, we're gonna trying to move across the street. And so again, it'd kind of be the same thing. That way there, the ownership stays with us, the liability stays with us, it's still the contract with the town to provide fire service, it's just we are adding another tool to use to make the fire department function better for the town.
So, we've just started discussions between you and Chief Moore on coming back to the table and discussing possible merger, consolidation, those are heavy words. How do you foresee that playing into now a piece of property where you're hoping to put a new firehouse? If out of those discussions came that the town didn't see that that's where a new firehouse would go, but that was your intended purpose for purchasing the land, right? That's the most ideal. If we're going to put a firehouse there, this is a great piece of property for you to buy. Have you thought about what if that didn't happen? If the town at some point didn't say this is where a firehouse should be?
Yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario, like I've discussed, is the volunteers are putting up $300,000 of fundraising and donation money, and we're asking the town for $60,000. And we would certainly enter into an agreement if it's not used for a fire department, that money goes back. If the property's sold and not used as a fire department, the $50,000 would go back to.
I'm thinking not just about the
the
$60,000 from the town, but as a whole. I mean, you are putting up $300,000. If that's not the way it went, had your membership thought about keeping that piece of property if you still found its value and just having use of a hall, those kinds of things?
Yeah,
I'm not talking just about this $50,000, but in general.
It's really hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of options with the property, and basing it on consolidation or working together with the other department. My thought is we still need a firehouse where we are. We've been there almost 70 years and it's worked well for the town. So again, I mean, that's not a believable change no matter what happens with the dynamic of the fire departments, working together, consolidating or anything like that. Again, it's been there, it's nobody's argued the fact that it should be moved or anything like that. So again, it's just the building needs to be updated, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, whether it's one fire department or four. It still needs the upgrades, it still needs the extra space, it still needs the safety features and the health concerns for the firemen, stuff like that. We have none of that.
And I want to go back to my previous request, that I think further conversations on the innumerable potentialities of the future don't help us move forward in this process. And I think if there's a concrete request of what the money's for, what the agreement is, then we can maybe talk about going to a town meeting. But short of that, the conversation will continue to go in the current pattern of ask questions and answers for hypotheticals that we don't, I mean, any number, we can think of any number of hypotheticals. So what I would really like to see is something concrete. Where is the money coming from? What is it going to do? And what is the agreement between the town? Spelled out, written. If you don't sell it, it goes back to us. The funds go back to, or if you don't build a department, the funds come back to us. Or if you decide not to build a department, we have first right of refusal to purchase the property at X percentage. I think that's the kind of information that we need in order to move forward. And then as these other conversations develop, we can address those. I think, and maybe I'm not seeing this the same way everybody else is, but regardless of whether this property is purchased with the intent of a firehouse right now or not, it's not happening next week. We have a lot of years until we're gonna be able to build a fire department.
Right.
And there are a lot of inevitabilities and potentialities that can happen in that time frame. So I think what we need to know now is what is the agreement, what is the current plan, and what is it getting us, right? Like,
Yep, and like I've said, I mean, our short-term goal is to expand now, and we'd be able to utilize the buildings that are on that property. We'd be able to utilize the acreage that's on the property, the parking lot, training, office space, a number of things that we could utilize that property for immediately, and reserve it for, again, who knows what, like Liza just said. So, I mean, our intent and our goal would be a new firehouse, because we know we need it, so it's just, yeah, no, jump in.
And not to,
State your name for the
sorry, Alex Moore, Chief of Wellington one. I think the fire departments in general both need a lot of work. If you look at the CIP plan, I think this year there was $5.5 million that was on CIP. And not to talk bad, but half of that did get cut out. We really need to have a plan moving forward. Wellington 1, Wellington Hill, as one department, there needs to be a townwide plan moving forward for emergency services as to what we're going to do with our properties. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I know my department, we have 2 guys that sleep next to the bay where the trucks are. One is in an office, and one's in a multi-purpose room that they sleep, eat, everything else in. So we need to have a plan altogether, not just, and I'm not trying to bash this, but as a whole town, we need to have a plan.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. But in the short term, again, we're trying to secure this property because it came available. And we don't want to see it go by the wayside, we don't want to see it go to somebody else. Short term, we'd like to lock it down, secure it. Like Chief Moore said, come up with a plan, a complete plan that would work for the whole town. And again, if it doesn't happen to go to a firehouse, we would certainly do, like Liza was saying, first rights to the town for other things or what have you. But again, we feel that it would be the ideal opportunity for us to secure the property, lock it down for the price that they're letting us buy it for, and use it as is, and expand from what we really need in our current location, just temporarily. And then go from there, like you said, come up with a bigger plan, go to CIP, budget things better, and that's exactly what my plan is to do, is get better figures for CIP, for additional construction over there and stuff, so, again, long term, we're talking about a town plan and a town agreement with CIP.
Well, so I think I'm hearing Liza say you want to see an agreement and exactly what it is they want in this process before we move forward.
I think if we're calling a town meeting and asking the town to vote on something, they need to have the words that they're voting on.
Yep.
If I can add to that,
Mhm.
the Board of Finance, when they meet and they have their meeting, they basically set it up for me to
That's
give
right.
to you, and they gave me nothing.
Right,
There's like an allocate, like
Right.
funds
So
for.
that needs to be answered, and I think an agreement needs to be made, and that might be a conversation between the Board of Selectmen and Wellington Hill specifically about what the investment in this property, what a shared investment in this property looks like, and what concretely how that plays out in terms of the use of that property.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, the shared investment really is not the way it's going to play out, in my opinion. It would be an investment towards the contract for fire service, which would not change unless you need it to change. And we'll certainly write up an agreement to say that the, first rights or the money goes back to you guys if we turn around and sell it and we're not going to use it, things like that, and exactly what the money would go for.
So
The
that's important
utilities and,
information, I think.
Yeah, the
Again,
utilities
that
and
needs to be
the,
spelled out. So
and
if the town is not, if it's not a shared investment, and then it will, so then essentially it'll be a firehouse or nothing on that property.
or like I
With
said,
your
we could,
ownership.
we could give first rights. Well, if it's not
Right.
a firehouse, then.
But as long as you own it, it's
Yeah.
a firehouse or nothing, right?
Right.
So again, I think that just needs to be clarified, so that if we're
Well, I think-
asking,
In order
For
to
this money.
use town funds through the grant for emergency services, it has to be used in that capacity, if that's what we're giving funds to.
Yeah.
Because although the request hasn't been formalized at the Board of Finance, that's where we're asking it to come. We give them out of a fund for emergency services, so it needs to be utilized in that capacity.
And again, it's not a closed door to say, it's just gonna be used for fire department as soon as we purchase it and own it. I mean, we could certainly work with the town again to come up with some kind of agreement if, I think the rec department discussed with the realtor, they'd like to use the rectory for something, and they were asking them, they were pretty adamant about they wanted to use it for something, and we'd be more than open to say, okay, let's work that out.
Sort of like the current agreement. I just think it's clarity of, right, it's just right now, it's hard to say what we are asking people to
In an
decide.
ideal process, there would have been a CIP request that have all that stuff, all those details spelled out, and we would know more in the process here. And so we're kind of
Yeah, so I will
backing
break
into the
it down
process.
for what the request is going to exactly go for, and then write up an agreement that says, like we talked about, I'll have our attorney bring that.
So let's say this process doesn't play out in the time frame you have, right? Because you're working under time
Mhm.
constraints. Do you have the means to purchase the property
We do.
in that time frame? Okay. Yes, just state.
Yes. I got a question. Bob Ushinsky.
I'm sorry, state your name for the record.
Ushinsky, Edmund Road. If people get a mortgage today, why can't you go to the bank and get a mortgage instead of bothering the town to buy it? Or unless you have adequate more funds to buy it outright.
No, we would have to take out a loan. We have options of very flexible financing, and that's what we'd have to do, Bob, is
Well, that's
just finance
okay.
the extra part of it. And I just didn't look at it as a burden to the town.
A
You know, I
burden to
looked
the
at
town,
it.
why?
What's that?
Why would it be a burden to the town if you?
No, you said it, instead of making it a burden to the town, why wouldn't we just do it?
Right.
I'm not looking at it like a burden to the town. I'm looking at it the opposite, as a help to the town, that it's a much-needed facility and better services for the town in terms of fire service. So again, that's the way we're looking at it, and we're also looking at the fact that, again, with fundraising and donations and stuff, we're putting out $300,000 and sacrificing our stipends that, provides incentives for these firefighters to volunteer their time. And now we're just asking for a little bit of help so we don't have to finance, and it's part of the town's project to better the services for the town.
Because we give up our stipends to pay for the nightman.
Yeah, well,
So
I get it.
why don't you give up your stipend to pay for the land?
We are,
All of it.
we are.
Oh, you're gonna pay for it all, you don't need the 50,000.
We need the 50,000, we have to finance. We only have the 300, Bob.
Oh,
We
okay.
finance the
Well, I would
50,000.
go to the bank and see what they got.
Well, we've done that, we have
Oh, okay.
flexible
I
finance
just-
locked in.
That's my question, that's all I wanna know
Yeah.
if it's
no.
feasible.
Yeah, and again, and your department decided to pay full-time staff with
Okay.
with your money. We could certainly do the same thing, I guess.
We are not, I'm saying right now, I don't think we're going to be calling a town meeting tonight because we simply don't have the information that's necessary. And I think what needs to be done here, if this is going to happen, is that the fire department and Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen have to sit down with an attorney. Because we're talking, the town will get, can have the directory, or the town can have first call if it doesn't work out. All these things that can happen, but ultimately that's gonna have to be done on paper before this is all done. And we're not writing it, let's face it, we're gonna need somebody who knows how to write it, and that means an attorney. Once the attorney has done it, then the board has sat in and come up with an agreement. Then the Board of Finance can meet and can give us what we need from them, which is, on the recommendation of the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen will call a town meeting to appropriate $60,000 from line item, whatever line item it's coming from, for the purpose of, and it's gotta be something more than just maintaining this property, it's gotta say the purpose of what it's gonna be spent for.
Absolutely.
And then go to town meeting. And we don't have anywhere near that right now, so,
Again, I mean, I'm willing to speak with our attorney to have them write up the document that you're requesting. that's not, that wouldn't be a big deal to either side, unless you guys want to have the town attorney do
You
it.
could do that, but we have, I mean, we
Of course
definitely
you
have to
have
have
to
the town
review it,
attorney
right.
take a look.
Well, I
at
think
it.
you have to have both attorneys. You know, when two organizations are dealing, they,
I can have it to you by the end of the week.
So in that vein, I'd like us to table any further conversation on the topic until we have the information that we need in order to move forward.
Motion.
That's a motion. I didn't realize I need, in the form of a motion, because it's in jeopardy. I make a motion that we table any further conversation on this agenda item for next meeting, or until we have the information required to make a decision.
well, I will second it just to go on under discussion
Right,
to
so discussion on,
furthermore,
discussion on the motion to table the discussion.
so I think you and them and Board of Finance
Okay.
start getting together and discussing how to handle this.
Again.
Yeah.
Again.
And in that case, yes,
Restart.
I am in favor of her
Okay.
motion.
Any other discussion on the motion to table this discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. We encourage you all to stay and hang out, but understand that if you don't want to stay for the entire meeting, we won't be offended. All right.
For yourself.
Oh, that's not you too. The next item is the water hookup on Old Farms Road. So as I move forward with the process of determining how we begin, how we're billing, and all of the details, I've come across I'm getting conflicted advice as to how the permit with the town, our current water system would come from DPH. I'm still waiting for further details because I'd spoken multiple times with Mike Page at DPH, who's head of the water section. And in our discussions, that has not been something that has come up until now. So I think it's important that we know
And your discussion, what is not on now?
that there could be a change in the type of permit we have for our water if we allow this residence to connect.
Okay.
And so, look, we made a decision based on different circumstances at that point. If we thought there was going to be significant changes to the system that we have, would we have made the same motion? That I'm not sure. So I think at this point, that our motion was to allow, if he chose to connect, and that we had to come up with a procedure, right? So, which is not, in this process, I'm getting conflicting advice and information on how that's affecting the town. And until we have some of those written answers, I think we need to make sure that nothing moves forward with connection from the resident at this point.
Can you give me an idea of what or give us an idea about what the conflicting information is?
So Mike and I have been working on some agreements that are in place, so then we could go to the town attorney with them. The billing is probably the easiest part, right? So we use Connecticut water billing, and that's how we do it for ourselves anyway, because they already exist in WIllington, so we've been using those rates. And so the brief conversation that Mike had that he shared with me late on Friday was that they believe this is now, there could have a potential change to the type of permit we have, which could cost us thousands of dollars and a larger liability than we knew about from the get-go. This is not information that has been shared with me in my multiple conversations. So what I'm looking for now is some direct conversation with Mike Page and something in writing. And that and so until we have those answers, I think we need to, we're not saying he can't connect, but I think we need to put pause on the process so that we have all of the answers. We're looking at different information than we did in January when we made this decision, right? If someone had come to us and said some of these things to us, would we be making the same decision today? Maybe yes, maybe no. So I-
there's potential change in fees, change in insurance, potentially. is what-
Potentially, and I don't know what all those are. Look, I could get something from him that says no, and the answer to this is no, and we can continue to move forward. But I think we need to have those answers before we move forward in the process. At this point, we have not heard from the resident since that last January meeting, or the communication the day after our January meeting where he dropped off those papers. I have not had any communications in my office, neither have they in the land use department. That's not to say I don't believe he's not going to move forward with it, but this was the last communication we had with him. So in order to do the digging, which he had agreed to pay for based on our motion, he would then have to come to the town for permits before he could dig in the road and connect into there, and we talked about putting a procedure in place. And so while all that goes, yes,
Rick Maloney again, now would you propose a regulation? I mean, I'm thinking that an ordinance would be appropriate.
so I'm thinking
Let me
based,
just finish my question. I think an ordinance is appropriate because I think this is really a question for the town, not for the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
you're welcome, and to address that, I believe the answer to that is yes, if the information we're given is a larger impact than we have first been told, then yes, I absolutely agree with
Okay,
that.
good. I
But
think that makes sense.
It does, which is why I want to push pause on it. I'm not saying to the homeowner, no, we can't go forward yet. I think we need to have some of those questions answered, and that it may mean a bigger process, so that,
Just as a history, it was really difficult battle to bring that water all the way up to center school. And now it's there, which is a good thing, you know, so, you know, what does this water system become, I think is a question for the town. And I think bringing it forward in an ordinance makes some sense, so thank you for your due diligence.
yes. So, again, I think it is our due diligence to make sure we are moving in the right direction as a whole. And again, had we had this information from DPH in the beginning, we may have looked at this very different. So my advice is that we send a letter to the resident informing him of that, if that's what this board agrees to.
So we need a motion on anything?
This has been going on for more than a year now. And my problem with the whole thing here is, those who don't know it, the resident has a building up here by town office building, and he wants to bring water to the building. And in a perfect world, he would call Stevens Brothers, they'd come up, they'd drill a well, he'd pay them, they'd have a job, he'd have water, and all would be right with the world. But it's not a perfect world. And President Reagan, one of my heroes, had a great quote. He said, the most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And that is exactly what we have happening here. Our resident wants to drill a well. There's no reason he should not. It's not going to deplete the water table. It's not going to pollute the Fenton River. So he goes to the health district, and the health district says, you can't drill a well, you're too close to this water main, you have to tap into the water main. So he says, well, okay. And he comes here and says, I want to tap into the water main. And we say, what? You what? We didn't make this water lane for the likes of you, you're going to have to drill a well. So now where are we at? All he wants is water, and he has every right in the world to have water. And we have this, well, you can't do it because this regulation says you're too close to the main. So we had back in January, did you ever talk to the attorney on that at that time? At that time you said that we...
Yes, I did.
You did, and you said that we hadn't a choice. We didn't have to allow him to tap into it, but we could if we wanted to. And so I made a motion that we would tap into it, and or that we would allow him to tap into it. And he said that he would give us help, and he did. He sent us a procedure, I guess you'd call it, and what we should do to do it, and where we could get the proper meters, and pretty good. And now nothing happens until May, and now we're saying, oh geez, we just found something. Last week we were gonna send it to the assessor, I believe, and have them look at the property card and see how much water we were going to use. And I thought, well, geez, I didn't know the assessor had anything to do with water use, but I guess we could send it to the assessor. Now we've had, who's this from? Is this from the, this latest information you got?
This is me working with our zoning agent.
Our zoning agent. I'm afraid this is.
And I've had multiple conversations with DPH, multiple, John.
Yeah.
This is not, I started working on this yesterday,
Okay, has any of them ever said anything to the effect that we gotta find a way to get water to this guy?
So the first thing I'll tell you is the resident has water. We don't have a resident without water, John. He wanted a second water source.
Okay. That still, does he have a right now, or does he?
Yes, he had the ability to put in that second well.
He did.
He did.
Except
Which we
for the help.
established at
He
subsequent
established
meetings.
at that originally, that is what, he contends that they denied him. She did not deny him. She forwarded to Stevens Brothers the paperwork that said he had to file for an exemption. With the
Okay.
exemption, he could have put in that well.
Maybe. Because we're dealing with the bureaucracy here, and I keep hearing everything is why he can't put in that well. And if I remember correctly, at that meeting in January that he was here, he said, I applied and it was denied, and was it you said that, oh no, they changed their mind and they authorized it long ago.
Holly had her own working notes.
Mhm.
She did not send a denial. She sent an email to Stevens Brothers specifically stating where they were at that point and that he could then file for an exemption. They did not ever open that email, admittedly so to the health department. And that's where a lot of the confusion began. They believed he had been completely denied, and Holly in the health department says that is not true. Here's an email from August 27th. Please see attached, homeowner will have to receive an exemption from DPH. He and the town need to complete their sections. The town completed their section on September 7th. The resident refused to, as he had been denied. Even though we were saying he just needed an exemption because of the distance to the current water. Yeah.
First Selectman, I just want to be clear, it's Rick Maloney again. I mean, a proposal for an ordinance would be to allow that homeowner to tie into that municipal water system. I encourage an ordinance so that we have a mechanism in place so that homeowners can get to that water. I think it makes sense. I mean, so just to be clear, I would encourage an ordinance so homeowners can get to the source. Okay.
And that is similarly what we had discussed months ago, when
Right.
we were having this conversation, that we were not interested in blocking
No.
homeowners from getting to that water source.
That's right.
That we were hoping to put in process ways for that to happen. And I think the conversation today is not whether or not he can do it, but whether we're following the right process to make sure that it's happening correctly, and if it has significant implications for any bottom dollars, because that is very important to us, that we are making that decision accordingly and with
So
all
have
the
we,
information.
so now the land use attorney,
No, not the land use attorney. So I spoke with our attorney, who's here this evening, as to whether or not we should in fact push pause on this so that we have all the answers, and we discussed wanting them needing them in writing at this point.
And Brian O'Donnell, Town Attorney with Siegel, O'Connor, O'Donnell, Beck. I can speak to that. The information that we had earlier, when we were moving forward with this process, has been contradicted by new information we received from the state. Based on that new information, this project could wind up costing the taxpayers thousands of dollars. And it also raises new legal liabilities for the town, depending on which set of facts is true. So the prudent course of action that I've counseled the board to take is to not kill the project, but to just pause it for a couple weeks, maybe a month, while we gather all the facts and get some information in writing from the state, so that the next time we hear a set of contradicting facts, we can say, well, on this date you wrote to us with these facts, why is that changing? And I think until we have that document in place, I'm hesitant for this project to move forward.
And what I don't want to see happen is for the homeowner to begin the process and then something else change. Because once that starts, and I want to make sure it's all done right for him as well, for that homeowner, and then see where we want to move with any future use of that water system. This is simply just making sure we're doing our due diligence.
It goes from January to all of a sudden, we come back here and start it, and the minute we start again, we have another delay, and now we're into almost the end of May. So now, another 2 weeks or 2 months, how long, any idea?
Johnny, you know, I don't have to tell you that it takes the government a little while to get back to us sometimes.
Yes,
So-
I know, so to say 2 weeks is, hey, don't worry, it's only 2 weeks, could mean a year.
Well, if we try to shake the trees and push them, I think we can get it done. I mean, had we known this was going to happen, that we would have contradicting sets of facts from the state, we could have pushed a little harder, but you know, usually when you get one set of information, that's the one to work with. Frankly, it's just, we're fortunate that we've got this now before the process had moved on even further.
And I think that's the key point. It's not, this conversation is not in reaction to the process beginning. This is prior to anything coming to us with proposals or permits or requests or anything, that we are continuing to find out information. So it's not as if, you know, the backhoe was getting ready to dig and we said stop. There's nothing happening.
I've had
in this
zero
process,
communication, as far as I know, in the town hall, no one has heard from the resident regarding this issue as of this moment. So where he is in the process, I'm unsure. He was to come to us when he was ready, which was how we kind of left it when he was.
I thought he said he was gonna send us information, which he did, and I don't know, for all I know, okay, I sent him the information, now I'm waiting, and he will wait until one day he shows up here yelling and screaming and threatening to sue again, so.
Well, what are you comfortable with, John, in that scenario? Like, are you preferring to say move forward without doing our due diligence and collecting information? Or are you in support of us collecting information now while we still have an opportunity before we get down the road and then have to say stop?
I will be in support of us collecting the information now,
Okay.
if we're not having this conversation a year from now.
Well, none of us can guarantee anything other than what decision we're making right now, which would be,
On our end, I think we're moving forward to have a process in place. That is my goal, and not to sit on this and wait and wait and wait. We're trying to get answers, and one question leads to something else. And we're at the point where before it's.
Which is another point, I will be comfortable with this, is if we get an answer to this question telling us to go right ahead, not to have somebody else come by the next day and say, oh, by the way, I have a regulation here, which, et cetera, you know, so this bureaucratic delay that every time you're ready to go, somebody else comes in and says, wait a minute, I got a different regulation here.
so I'm gonna make a motion that we pause any current progress on the water hookup line, with the water line hookup, until we have something in writing from the state.
Until this particular, what we call it, regulation, this particular, come on,
TPH.
situation,
Situation.
until this particular situation is resolved. I will Yeah, I'll go along with that, but I will lose patience after a few months too. So was this
That was your motion?
Yep.
motion? I'll
Make that
second.
motion.
Any discussion?
You want me to?
Yes, please.
We move to pause any progress with the water line hookup until we receive documentation from the state.
And you added
And
something?
then Blessington seconded and said he will go along with that, but we'll lose patience.
That is not part of the motion. Although,
In addition.
might be. Fine, I'm fine with that language. I know that John suggested
I'll add
something else,
John's,
but.
Yeah, I'll add it,
Get it for the recording.
Yeah, I'll get it off the recording.
All right, any other discussion revolving the motion? Involving the motion.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We'll communicate with the resident as soon as possible. All right, update on the exploratory flag committee, update. So I think we can stop calling it exploratory committee. At this point, if you drove here or walked here, you saw the flags coming up 74 and all the way down towards the senior center, and they do go down into the senior center. We are behind Mr. Monty. So Mr. Phil Monty is here. He's the committee chair, and you want to give an update? I can read your update.
On Saturday, we put out 31 flags. At the time, we had 25 that we purchased. Well, we purchased 24. One was donated by BJ's. Since that time, we've got funding for additional flags. The goal was to put out 34 flags. There are 5 poles that still need additional flags. Some of the flags that were put out were purchased last year, and they're not of the same quality and type as the other ones there. So depending on how much more money comes in, we will purchase additional flags and put them up on Saturday. We put up a couple of flags on Senior Way that go with this. This is a campground area. They're for other ones. Here's a picture of the ones on the coming down the road. If we get additional monies this year, we'll put them aside, and my goal now is to add additional flags down to the cemetery. While we're putting up the flags, we got a lot of positive comments, and we thank all the people that donated money toward the flags that we were able to put up.
So you would still seek further donations if anyone wanted to, correct?
Right, I'd like to put up at least additional 5 flags. As I say, if we get more, next year I'd like to go from the library all the way down to the cemetery.
So I got, I as well heard positive feedback, so I had a couple of phone calls. And so my only regret is that I wish more people would drive down Old Farms Road so they could see how nice it looks. Because it is quite, it's quite eye-catching when you come down the road. So thank you for all your work, to yourself, Mr. Rondo and Mr. Chicky, in your efforts.
If I could add one other comment.
Sure.
Joe is head of the Veterans Committee there at there, and we did get 2 benches put up also at the memorial down there. And so there are benches for the Veterans Memorial down at the Senior Center.
So listen, Saturday looked very nice. And you said the scouts, if I'm correct, you said the scouts came and helped him once again?
No,
No, they did not.
well,
Oh,
the person that's put the 200 benches in that camp came and helped us install them.
okay. Well, thank you very much. So hopefully by Monday, by parade day, we will have inundation of donations and we can put up some more flags. It look very nice. Thank you for your work. Anyone else? Okay. So new business. Time to award the 2019-2020 propane contract. So typically, Robin would have opened the bids and then There's a worksheet involved where she'll give us the labor rate and break down some of the things. Robin was out one day and one of the vendors brought in his bid and asked specifically if they were going to be opened in public. There was no date on the letters given, so I asked Robin to not open them because we had not given a date in which they would be, just the date in which they would be awarded, which was tonight, so that then we could open them tonight in the event that vendor wanted to be here for the public opening. I thought that was the best way to handle that. Oftentimes, if they're gonna, there's a date on there, and then we'll open them at that point. So just so that we did not, one was returned,
Yeah, that's-
okay.
and sometimes there's confusion too, so it's not.
There is. So Robin, again, there's some calculations that go into, which take her some time, so hopefully we can see that out this evening so that we can go ahead and award the bid.
What's the first one?
So the first one is Hocon Gas of Suffield. So their price of propane per gallon is $1.24.9, no hazmat. Labor rate per hour regular is $55. Labor rate per hour after hours was $75. Labor rate per hour on holidays and weekends, $75. Trip charge, not applicable. Signed Kevin Veering, 5/9/19.
Labor, did you say 55 or 65?
75, 55, 75, 75. The next bid is from High Grade Gas Service. Signed by Nelson Aiken of High Grade Gas. Price per gallon, price of propane per gallon, $1.09. Labor rate per hour regular, $69. Labor rate per hour after hours, $125. Labor rate per hour holidays and weekends, $125. Trip charge not applicable. Signed to Nelson Aiken, High Grade Gas, 5/8/19. There was a bid return, or request returned to us from E. Osterman in Plainville, Mr. Joseph Capabianco. And this is Superior Energy. Signed by Rick McCaffrey, Superior Energy. Price of propane per gallon, this is a one-year contract probably?
Yeah.
Okay. $1.38.9 for a 2-year locked-in price. Labor rate per hour, $150 for the first hour, then $100 an hour thereafter. Labor rate per hour after hours, $275. And a labor rate per hour holidays and weekends, $275. Trip charge not applicable, signed by Rick McCaffrey, Superior Energy, 4/30/19. Those are our three propane bids.
So if I remember correctly, one of the things that we did last year is looked at the, tried to get like a general idea of how many labor hours we required, to see if that offset the cost difference for the gallon, the price per gallon, because one is at 109, but the labor is more. So if that makes a significant difference, like if they're out here regularly, then that makes a significant difference.
Right, and
Do we have that information?
I didn't get it. I don't recall that we have them out on the holidays, definitely not, because we're not here, so we wouldn't, I can find that out, because I don't remember. I think you guys based it last year on, or after we looked into it, that there wasn't a requirement for them, for much labor. Ocon was the state office.
Ocon was on the stage.
And we've had high grade
Right.
for years.
Okay. Yes, so and Hokan was the $1.24.9 a gallon. Interesting, he's the only one who mentions hazmat. And then Superior Energy uses $1.38.9, but says for a 2-year locked-in price, but it's only a 1-year bid. So I think if you bid again next year, we might see the same.
And I just thought of that too, when you were saying, I'm like, oh, I should have brought that from last year for him.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is sort of off the,
Superior
yeah,
Energy.
it's off the table. And then it's a question between the other two, depending on how many hours we end up using on average.
And we've been satisfied to this point with our service with high grade.
Yeah, we've had them forever.
We did,
We've been satisfied with the cheapest. Fairly easy to.
again, their labor rates are more, that may not
Labor rates
play
are more
into.
Both on, but less superior.
That kind of,
Correct.
because
So that was going to be my next, based on the fact that we said in the request that it would be awarded tonight, and we table awarding it till our next meeting.
it's a July.
If July 1, someone feels they want more information,
I knew I could go up and get the information like in 4 minutes.
Table it?
if you feel you'd like to have that information, you can table it farther.
I mean, I'd like to have that information and/or information that,
So it's-
to confirm that we don't.
And I
need
knew that was
very
a risk by not opening it before, but because a bidder had specifically asked, and we did not put a date, I thought it was important that we use this as the date that we opened them.
And it actually would be more important to ask finance
Yes.
what we've spent this past year instead of.
That's true, yes. So either or information, I think, is important to us, so.
You wanna make a motion? Table?
Sure, I'm making a lot of motions.
You are making a lot of motions.
I make the motion to table this pending more information about what? About service hours, number of service hours?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll put this on the agenda for June 3rd. It'll be here before you know it. Okay, I have a tax refund. So I move to refund CCAP Auto Lease Ltd. $308.27 on a certificate of correction.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, IT contract. So we share IT services with the Board of Education. In the past, the Board of Education has signed the contract, and they've moved in their process. On last Tuesday night, the 14th, they voted in favor of moving forward to approve an IP support contract with Novus Insight. Novus Insight is, they're unique, they're a subsidiary of a nonprofit company that provides IT support and not products. They will make recommendations, but they're not selling products. And we believe, the superintendent and I have met with them, and we believe that they're best going to meet our needs. We had already given notice to our current vendor, 90-day notice, so that as of June 30th, we would just not be renewing our contract with them. So, to meet our efficiency needs, long-term planning, we believe this is the right company to use. They are on a CROG bid list, so they're on a state bid list. There is a setup fee for a full evaluation of our system and all of our equipment that is $13,000. And then they've given us quotes on service comparable to what we have now. We currently have someone here 5 days a week. And then that would also include a 5-day-a-week person and a 1-day-a-week person to handle the school's specific needs around their power school. The company believes they could service us with fewer hours and their contract actually can be altered month to month so that we could downgrade if we find, after they've gone through our system, taken a look and addressed some of the issues we have, we believe we could lessen from 5 days a week to less. The towns that we contacted for reference don't actually have an IT, the town side, not the school side, but the towns, they do not actually have an IT person on staff. When they have needs, they come out, and everything else is handled through their help desk on a ticket system, which has been working well for everyone that we contacted. So Bill and I feel confident that that we can still work within our budget, even with that $13,000 startup, that we may start with a higher service and then be able to get down to lesser service towards the latter part of the year. And they came out and, we had multiple conversations with them about some of the struggles that we have now, and they feel confident that they could meet our needs with less hours. I definitely feel confident from the town side because we don't have someone here 5 days a week. We see Josh periodically, and he's not here all the time. And when he does, we kind of call on him as opposed to using the support system that's in place, putting in a ticket and waiting for it where someone outside could help. So I think it would just be a change of culture to get used to that. And we would have the same dedicated users here. So that is the direction that we're going. They would be signing a contract for the Board of Ed side. Steph, were you at your Board of Ed meeting? I didn't know if you wanted to add anything from that direction. No.
No, I mean, just that I've heard that, I think that the leaning is toward the new contract.
Yeah, so they did actually make there was a motion to approve the contract at last Tuesday's meeting, so it will affect us, and that would, the contract would then begin July 1. So look forward to moving forward and having a successful term with them.
And this is a company we've been talking with for quite a while.
We've met with them, Phil and I have met with them twice. I think he's talked to them about some of his more specialized concerns within the school that don't affect the town side. They have some different reporting, they use a different system. And I'm really curious to see what will happen when they come out and evaluate our equipment. So we definitely have some older systems that are going to need some addressing soon.
So is this, do we need a motion to award this contract, or are we just, is this FYI?
So in the past, it's been signed by the Board of Ed, and then we end up splitting the cost, so our side doesn't need to do anything. I think it's important that we be on board with them, but.
Because we already budgeted.
We budgeted for it, yes. It's been split between the Board of Ed and us, and our budget, our total budget between the two was $169. If we went with their proposal of 5 days a week plus the one power school person and the startup cost, we're well over that. But because we have month-to-month ability to change, we feel confident that we can make it, the lesser of the quotes got us well below that. So we are confident.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Did the Board of Ed go out to bid? Do you know?
No, it was from a state bid.
Oh, they pulled it off at the
Correct.
state bid? Okay. I know that we're gonna miss Josh
We
Mindeck, I think he's done a good job. And
We
it's
completely agree.
unfortunate that he's leaving.
And we did hope to look at different ways where we could continue, correct. And we've spoken to Custom Computers about our level of in-house support. Our issue with Custom Computers was never the people we had on the ground here. When we did have an issue with someone, that was addressed and he was replaced. We've had no issues with Josh, and that has been shared with Custom in hopes that he'd be able to move forward. If they didn't have some of the clauses in their contract, we would have considered keeping Josh ourselves. So there's some contract conflicts there, so that is the most difficult part when you have someone who works really well with you. That contract language gets you every time. All right, so under good and welfare, the budget passed. There were 270 voters. So the general government budget passed, 210 yeses to 60 noes. The Board of Ed budget passed, 185 yes to 85 noes. The Region 19 budget passed as well, 184 in the yes, 86 no. And Region 19 roof project passed 175 yes to 94 no. So thank you to all those who worked diligently over many, many months on the budget, and those voters who came out to vote. The mill rate was set at the Board of Finance meeting last Thursday. It was set, once again, at 30.09, so it did not increase. And Willington Day is this Saturday, the 25th, at River Road from 11 to 3, and the fishing derby begins at 4. I still call it Thompson's Pond, although the Thompsons do not own it. So the new owners have generously allowed the fishing derby to continue on their property. So thank you to the Hughes family for that. The PTA Fun Run is also Saturday morning. That is here at Center School. I believe the 5K starts at 8 a.m. And I would encourage you to go to the school website for more information on the Fun Run. Then the Memorial Day Parade will be Monday morning, which is the the 27th? No, it's the 27th. We'll meet on the green. So listen, it likes to rain every other 5 minutes here, so let's all hold out for nice weather for both Willington Day and to honor our fallen veterans at Memorial Day. So join us there. We had one of those communications was from Troop C. They have a new commanding officer, Lieutenant Robert Palmer, as of May 14th. So we just received that mail today, so I have not met with him. I hope to meet with him, similar to share our concerns like I did with Lieutenant Corey, who was willing to hear our concerns and those of all of our residents as we shared it, and really willing to work with us. So I hope to have the same relationship with Lieutenant Palmer. We still have the same liaison, this is just their commanding officer. So, Mr. Monti, I want to thank you for all the work on those nice flags. It looks really nice, and it's going to be nice for Monday's activities. Anything else you'd like to share from the ballpark? On the last day of school is June 13th. Because I believe there's no more snow. I think it is better. You just say that. All right, without anything else, I motion to adjourn at 8:06.
Second.
Thank you.